Welcome to the Radical Lifestyle Podcast, brought to you by Generation to Generation, where you will be inspired by the past, equipped for the present, and prepared for the future as we engage in conversations with people from around the world. Hello everyone, this is Andrew and Daphne from Generation to Generation, and our guest today is Joshua Goldenberg. So, for people that don't know who you are, can you just say a bit about where you're from and what are you currently doing in life?
Well, my name's Josh. I'm 17 years old. I'm currently taking A-levels in England, and it's exciting. It's fun. I'm an international preacher. I've traveled around the world. I've spoken in countries like Brazil, and it's been really great to sort of go around the world and speak there. So
Okay,
me.
I love Brazil, but I know people will be listening to this, especially maybe from America, and they're going to be going, A-levels what? What is that? So can you just say a bit about what are A-levels?
A-levels are basically this exam that you take where you sort of universities in England will look at them and say, okay, it sort of judges how good you are, how well you're doing in academics. Basically, it's the exam you do to get into most universities.
What's the equivalent of that in America?
I don't know if they have an equivalent.
Oh, okay. Well, that was the end of that then.
So, I said to you, what topic would you like to talk about or start off talking about? And I gave you 2 or 3 options, which I thought were pretty targeted for where you might be in life, right? And you took me by surprise and you chose a topic which is one of our favourite topics, but I never would have dreamed of offering it to you. And that was, you said, I'd like to talk about discipleship. So can you start off? Why did you choose discipleship?
Well, I mean, it's a broad topic, so we could sort of go anywhere with it, really. And I think I really have a heart for discipleship personally. I think my parents, Ollie and Helen Goldenberg, they're part of Children Can, and they are itinerant ministers, and they have the pure benefit and joy and luxury of traveling around the world. They're obviously not too much at the moment, and going and visiting places and preaching the word of God and seeing people saved. But whilst there is that amazing strength of that, there is a weakness also formed in that, which is that they struggle to sort of disciple and grow those individuals that they save because they're not staying there for any decent amount of time. And I think a great thing about discipleship is it's a topic that the churches that I've been to, and this might be a slight overgeneralization, but the churches I've been to, they're all about, we need to go out and preach the word of God. We need to fulfill the go part of the Great Commission, but not the and make disciples. And I think when we're looking at sort of it's just finding that balance. And I don't feel discipleship as a whole is talked about enough in the church to sort of, as in the sense of growing people and sharpening people to become stronger Christians. So that's why I picked the topic.
So I'm trying to peel this back right to base level so that people can journey with you. What would discipleship ideally look like to you?
Discipleship for me really looks like a discipler and a disciplee, and they're walking along with each other. And the discipler is someone who is stronger in the faith, who's been in that Christian walk for longer than the disciplee, if you will, and that he's helping to give that advice, and they're sharpening each other. Because I find personally, when you give advice, when you're doing that sort of thing, it actually helps to sharpen you and your faith as well, because you're reminding yourself of those sort of basics that you have. But also for the person who may have questions about the faith as they're sort of walking, as we all do, they can sort of go to someone who's more experienced. And if they don't know the answer, the more experienced Christian, I don't really like using that terminology because, no. I mean, it's pretty theologically, but but in the sense of that more experienced, stronger Christian, he or she can go to that Christian and say, I have these questions, and they can sort of broach that topic together and grow together. And that's sort of what Jesus did with the 12 disciples. That's sort of what I see in that sense. which is people walking life together, walking through life, journeying through the Bible, journeying, just living life together and just doing it as Christians, sharpening each other. So that's sort of what I see discipleship as.
So at the beginning, when you introduced yourself, you said a bit about how, you're still very young. You're the youngest person that we've had on the podcast, I think. And but yet you also said, while I'm studying, I've also traveled internationally, spoken all over the place. And then you went on to talk about how your parents do that. And your upbringing within ministry could look a little similar to maybe mine and my upbringing within ministry and traveling the world and doing stuff. So going back to you and how you were raised, talking about discipleship, what did that look like in terms of your parents raising you, even your other brothers and sister? And so how did they do that with the traveling? How did they do that in terms of raising you as a family, but also in empowering you to take your place within the ministry as well?
Yeah, I think really what my parents did is they gave us the opportunities to grow. So throughout our entire sort of growth, we would grow up in their ministry. And then when me and my younger brother Simeon sort of reached a certain point, maybe 12 or 13, we started helping them out in the kids ministry, and we started helping them as kids workers in those sort of camps that they were going to across the world. And so I've had the benefit of sort of going to America and helping my dad out there, and Jersey, and I've been to France and Italy and all these places, and it's been amazing. But I think they gave us these opportunities to grow, and they always were open for us to ask them questions, which was extraordinarily helpful. And actually they encouraged us to ask those sort of questions. They encouraged us to keep on looking for those points where we just didn't understand, and we could come to them and ask, what's this about? I don't understand anything about this topic. Another area that they helped us is really they sort of they encouraged us to have our own personal times with God, and they would push that upon us, and they would help us to really grow in that. And so they were at the beginning, for around the first 14 years of our lives, they would say, have as many minutes a day with God as you are years old. So when we were 1, we'd have 1 minute, although we weren't really having times with God when we were 1 years old. But when we're 6, we're having 6 minutes, just sort of praying and reading the Bible. Because when you're that young, that time seems like forever. Yeah. And obviously now I spend a little more than 17 minutes a day with God. You'll be glad to know. But it just sort of helped to encourage that sort of routine and that pattern and that really healthy foundation of just sort of reading the Bible, praying, worshiping God on a daily basis, that it sort of surrounded our entire lives. So yeah.
So that answers to what discipleship looks like. Because many people think discipleship is something you go seek for outside your family. Well, it's both. It's in your family. So something happened with their discipleship, and I don't want to formularize this, but I do want to look at it, that many young people or young adults or even adults who are brought up with the sort of environment that you were, with the sort of environment that Andrew was, get labelled PKMKs as if this is the most awful thing that could possibly happen, and the expectation is you're going to fall away from God. I mean, but it's given as an excuse. They fell away. Oh, yeah, well, they were a PKMK. Like, that's the excuse. Something in their discipleship had a difference with you. What do you think it was that you didn't end up in that bracket? I know it's difficult to say, but have a.
Yeah, it's a difficult question in the sense that I'm not familiar with lots of other people's PKs, and I don't want to say something that's like, well, those parents did a dodgy job with their kids and all that sort of stuff. I think what my parents did that was really great with us and with all of us, and that they're still doing now, is they would encourage us to spend time as a family together as well as have our own individual times. This sort of strengthened the family unit as a whole, because when you spend time with God with other people, we would do that. And so we have our we call it our Jesus time. So our Jesus time is at 8:30 before school starts for all of us. We get together, or we were doing it earlier when I was in school, but lockdown, yippee, fun time. We've been doing it a little later, but we sort of would have a family time where we just sort of come together, and we'll start by, basically it's like a church service. That's a great way of sort of describing it, but it's just with all 7 of us, which is just our family, which is where we worship God. We might listen to a preacher, we might do a Bible study together, we'll pray together, we'll listen to hear words from God for us or maybe for other families, and we'll just sort of grow. And occasionally our parents, or not occasionally, quite often our parents will let us lead those times as well. And it gives us that appetite for growing in our leadership responsibility that we have as sort of, we're all called to lead people to Christ. So we're all leaders when we're Christians. And so they sort of helped us to grow in that sense, grow in confidence, as well as grow as a family. And that, I would say, is probably one of the strongest reasons. And they've also encouraged us also to look at other, that's a poor way of phrasing it. They've encouraged us to sort of look at every angle. And so at around 12, 13, I said, but what if Christianity isn't the only religion? And I looked at the likes of Islam and Buddhism and all this sort of stuff. And they said, and they weren't like, okay, go and do that. They walked alongside me with that. They sort of said, you see this, well, this is why we don't believe in this. And you see this, well, this is why we don't believe in this. And it is that shape. And that came to the point, I think recently it was atheism, because I started going to school for sixth form, for college. And so, yeah, I started going to school. And so a lot of evolution stuff came up because I'm taking biology. And so, and we were talking through all this stuff, and it was just walking through, and I was able, and they've given me the sort of, and they've given us the tools as well to sort of think through it and churn that through stuff ourselves. And obviously we have that foundation and that original mindset that is biased towards Christianity when looking at it from a logical point of view. But also we've had experiences, thanks to our parents' ministry, which is just when we're going on the road with them, and we've seen people get healed, that it's completely illogical to say that when you pray and then immediately straight after someone's healed, you then say, well, it must be a coincidence. And you might be able to say that one time, but when it happens so many times off the drop, I mean, we've seen people who had hearing aids and they've taken out, we've seen eczema just disappear, we've seen people with conjunctivitis in the eye just completely healed, asthma gone so many times, more than we can count. Like, we've seen all these healings take place, and it's like, well, hold up, that it's just such a solid, irrefutable experience in our own personal lives that we have no choice but to believe, really. Yeah. Just the sort of foundation they've given us.
So steering it back, not that we've left, but back to the Bible, where you said, he said go, and they leave out the making disciples talk. Command. Who are your favourite examples of discipleship in the Bible? If you said, I just love the model we had with those two, who would it be? Or a favourite?
I think, I mean, I would say the triple threat of Peter, James and John and Jesus, and how they sort of, whilst all 12 were his disciples, you see those three as the real sort of the tripod on which really the church sort of stood on. And that's because they were his closest disciples. They walked with him in such a way. For example, with this sort of stuff like the Transfiguration and all this sort of stuff, it was amazing, the experiences that they had with Jesus. Is sort of going back to sort of me and my parents in that sort of sense. Is that sort of, they've sort of grown in that sense through those experiences, which not many other people would have had. But then they were able to use those experiences and have their own experiences with their own disciples, if that that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be the ones that I've always sort of Peter's always been my favorite disciple. Always loved Peter. He's the guy that sort of messes up, but it's so he's the rock on which the church stands on, which is, you know, why Jesus renamed him and all this sort of stuff. It's that I've always loved just his character and how he develops and how he grows and how he makes the same mistakes that we all would make in that situation, but then he just keeps on going and keeps on striving, keeps on seeking after the things of God. So yeah, Peter personally is my favorite, but those three are amazing.
Yeah, I love what you said about how your parents they taught you how to do critical thinking for yourself, and they didn't just shut down your questioning things or your own journey in life. They walked alongside you, but taught you how to figure these things out for yourself and wrestle with them. Which I think is so important today. When we live in a time where everyone kind of is taught to think the same way, move the same way, and if you're not taught and raised to be able to think for yourself, think through these situations, then it could be so easily just to get swept along with everyone else. And so you want to say something? Oh,
I'm paying attention to
you. Your face, it looked like you were wanting to jump in and say something. And so I love that. One of the things that people always would question with us, when mum was raising me and my sister and discipling us when we were much younger, like I'm really old, but anyway, is they would say to her, what about their education? And how for you, what would your answer be to that, when people would say, and maybe people have asked the same question of you guys, well, what about their education? How would your parents juggle the education side, yet also the focus on the ministry and what God's calling you to do? What would your response be to people asking about that?
My immediate answer is that my parents were amazing, and I have no idea how they managed to homeschool 5 children as well as do an itinerant ministry and sort of help us and disciple us all along the way. I think because when you list all that sort of stuff, it's amazing. We are homeschooling wise, because we were homeschooled and then I've sort of gone on to college. We all homeschooled up to GCSEs, and those are sort of exams that you take to get into the college, to take the A levels, to then get into the university. And so it's like this stepping ladder. And yeah, so we all were sort of homeschooled and did GCSEs whilst we were homeschooled. And so we were all educated up to a phenomenal point, in fairness, which is we just did those GCSEs, that sort of secondary school or the high school equivalent. And so yeah, they just sort of helped us each day. We would sit down, we would follow sort of the national curriculum, and I know different homeschoolers do it different ways, and we would sort of sit down and do that and work our way towards GCSEs in the end, which is just keep on doing it. And we would work usually from 9 to 12, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we would have a set amount of work that we had to do each day, and they would give us that. But the day would always start with, we would be expected to be up, ready, dressed, brushed our teeth, had our own personal time with God by 8:30. And at 8:30, we then have our family Jesus time. And then at 9 o'clock, we start the day, start schoolwork. And then in the afternoon, we would usually go to some sort of social club where we would hang out with either another Christian club, or whether we just hang out with non-Christian friends who were also homeschooled as well. So yeah, we just sort of did that. Does that, I think that's sort of the answer to your question.
Yeah.
So we kind of jumped in and out of your the discipleship frame of your family, talking about discipleship generally. Have you people that you see in your life as either potential or that you are discipling, as well as having been discipled?
I think there are definitely people in my life who I have the benefit of being friends with, who I'm stronger Christians than, and who I walk along with in that sense. Whether we would put the label of discipling them on it probably wouldn't help them
No.
In terms of pride, or me because of my ego. But so I think there are definitely people, like I said, I've had the great benefit of being sort of pushed in at the deep end in terms of preaching to different people, and that's not stuff that my parents have sort of pushed me, and I've been randomly invited in God instances, like to Brazil, to speak to a church of over 1,000 people on Easter Sunday. That was crazy, and I found out I was preaching for like 10 minutes, 20 minutes before I started preaching. That sort of being thrown in at the deep end, and sort of when you're doing that, you have a choice to either learn to swim really quickly or drown. And I've been sort of pushed in those scenarios enough times that I can sort of be forced to grow. I hope I haven't drowned too much in those sort of scenarios, but it's that sense of growing, and that sense of growing in that sense that for most people my age, I can sort of help along, and they can help me as well, and we can sharpen each other. But I would say, and not to sound too like I'm amazing, but like I would say, because of those instances which I've been given and no one else has at my age, I've been forced to grow to such a degree where I can now help my friends in that sense grow in that way as well, and grow in sort of whether it's public speaking or Bible studying or prayer, because my prayer life really shot up during those times and all that sort of stuff. It's forced me to grow, and I can help disciple and help to strengthen what, like Proverbs says, iron sharpens iron like a friend sharpens a friend. It's that sense of sharpening the people around me, which I love doing. And that's sort of how I sort of relate to a lot of my friends in sort of like a jokey, bantery, fun, pushing them towards Jesus sort of way.
Well, you said one word which I think sums up discipleship, and it's a lifestyle. I'm living my life, and if I was going to sum up discipleship, it would probably be as a lifestyle. Think of all the people in the Bible. Elijah, Elisha, Moses, Joshua, Mordecai, Esther, Ruth, Naomi, all of them, they had a lifestyle alongside somebody.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you would have said to Naomi, "Is Ruth your disciple?" She probably would have said, "What's that?" as it were. But they had a discipleship relationship that benefited both of them.
Yeah.
So if I had in my life, say I had somebody about your age, and I've got a lot of them, but if let's think of a hypothetical, and I said to you, I've got this great relationship with this young person, I'm not quite sure what they would need from me. Like, I'm grandparent age, and I've got them. What would they need from me? Give me a few things that would really help me to connect with and be able to share my life as much as they shared theirs with me. Tell me, give me a few cues.
I think, first of all, you sort of need to develop that sort of sense of trust with that individual. And for that, you just need to really, most young people just need someone there to listen to them. Because I think for most young people, and luckily I don't feel like I'm in that sort of category, but I think it's fair to say that a lot of young people don't feel like they are listened to at the moment. And that's sort of where the sort of the spikes in mental health and all the sort of stuff it can be sort of related to, is that a lot of young people feel like they're struggling and they're drowning, and they just need someone to talk to. And once you've sort of developed that sense of relationship with them where they feel like they can approach you about that, you can then sort of say, well, let's pray about it. Like every single time they say, oh, today has just been a really sucky day at school. I've hated it. It's been, teachers have been on my back. I feel like I'm falling behind and everything. You can just say, oh, let's pray about that, and push them towards God, push them towards sort of, let's go to God about our issues. Sort of one thing that I sort of help people, help sort of individuals around me to do all the time is sort of like, okay, now you've had your rant. Let's go to God about it. Let's let our first reaction to any situation, whether good, bad, or ugly, should always be to go to God. And when our first reaction is to go to God, we can listen to him and hear him and see him and grow with him in that sense of what we need to do as individuals. And I think for young people, that sense of they need to have that person that they can trust. You need to have that person who they can go to with those situations. But once you establish yourself as that person, you want to encourage them and to just go to God with the problems. Not that you're the intermediary, but you want to make it so whilst they're not in a strong enough position so that you are so that you have to be the intermediary, you help them to grow to that position where they become strong enough individuals, strong enough Christians, where they can, their first instance, their first reaction is to go to God in whatever situation that they're going through.
Now,
So I was just going to say, and I guess in doing that, when things happen, when God provides, when he helps them through those situations, they automatically see, is God doing these things? It's not that Josh has come along and he's fixed my problem. You're saying, no, hang on. First of all, let's get this connection here. And when stuff goes right, they know, it was God that helped me through this situation, not Josh, who's just turned up with all the answers because you have all of them. So,
Oh, of course.
One of the scary things to me as a person who now is mostly a discipler, although I'm well open to being discipled, is something that Paul said. And he said, be imitators of me as I am of Christ.
Yeah.
And I often think with a discipleship relationship, you learn maybe 50% from watching the life of the other person.
Yeah.
You're taking in what they do, what they say. You're taking in, like if a tin of beans lands on their toes, how they're going to react to that. You're watching all the things along life's way, almost subconsciously as well. You're not just looking.
Yeah.
And I think when Paul said, imitate me as I do of Christ, a discipleship relationship gives somebody a tangible view, I'm trying to choose my words very carefully, of who Jesus is.
Yeah.
Now, and that is, I find that really scary sometimes. Yeah. I mean, you are laying your life open to another person, and when you say lifestyle, you're going shopping, or you're going to play soccer together, or you're doing things together, and without even saying it, they're watching and they're taking in. And if our actions deny our words, that, I think, to me, that is even greater damage than saying nothing. Would you agree?
Yeah, and sort of going back to sort of that sort of why some PKs and MKs sort of fall away. I think it's because those kids sort of look at their parents and they see their parents are one person on the stage, or for some of them, not all of them, obviously. No. But for some of them, the parents are one person on a Sunday, but at home they're a completely different person. And they're like, well, that doesn't make sense. How can someone in that sense be like that? And in the other way, just be like this person that I see at home. And so there's that. And I think 100% that's exactly what it is. But the danger of that is, and actually it's also a benefit as well for the discipler, which is, you're forced to make sure that you're there, because whilst we all know that God's sort of watching over us, that there comes a little bit extra accountability when there's someone else is sort of like watching your every move, watching that sort of sense, and it helps you grow as the discipler. But as the disciplee, you can see what the practical outworkings of scripture, what the practical outworkings of all that you've read are over this person. And you can also see the flaws of those individuals and see, okay, well, I don't want to have those flaws. How can I make sure that I work on myself in that way, or how I can help get God to help and work in me to not have those flaws and to be better than that. And the goal of the disciple, in my mind, is to make the disciplee a stronger Christian than you. That's the sort of, just like a parent. My parents say that their goal for me and for my siblings is that we would stand on the ceiling, on their ceiling, that their ceiling would be our floor. That's their goal for us, and that's sort of the goal of a discipler as well, for the disciplee.
Yeah. We say that phrase too. It's one of our favourite phrases. But I think taking the pressure off people who are listening and thinking about, oh, I couldn't possibly be a discipler because I couldn't possibly be like Jesus. I want to turn that over a bit. I think a disciple can learn from our mistakes, like you said, and also they can learn as we own them and said, hey, that was not the way we needed to have done this, or I can know that there's situations that I've been very proactive when I'm walking through hard times to say, look, you're going to have hard times. I'm going to have hard times. It's not easy, but let's see how we walk through this together. So it isn't about being perfect, be imitators of me as I am of Christ. I don't think that we've got to be perfect, but I think vulnerability is a big thing. Vulnerability,
humility. Those would be probably the two core things of being a discipler, is vulnerability and humility, and patience, I would say, is probably the other big one to throw in there as well, because people take time to grasp things unless they experience those things themselves. So if you've walked and lived through life and all this vast knowledge of things, I think something that going back to that previous question of helping that sort of younger generation, helping that sense, is you don't want to say, oh, you shouldn't do that because this will happen, because in all honesty, young people are a bunch of pigs. We won't listen to that. we'll be like, okay, great, but I think I know better than you, so sod it, I'm gonna go do my own thing. What you want to do is you want to just sort of be with them, and then when they make that mistake, you want to let them make that mistake. I think that's something that my parents have helped me to do, is they've allowed me to make mistakes. I've made enough mistakes now that I now know what to do when I've made mistakes, and for some people who have been shielded from making mistakes, in that sense, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to react. And especially in a Christian life, there's a whole other dynamic to that than just in a normal life, or normal life. Yeah.
Well, I think for me personally, being able to disciple or live life with is probably the way I would put it, rather than disciple. And we're living life together. I would say it's one of the greatest privileges, joy, so much fun. I mean, I would just be lost without the younger generation in my life. And so I just want to put that out there while we're talking this in a multi-generational way, as we have done, that I wouldn't want to lose out on it. And I would encourage listeners, don't lose out on it, because my life would be so much poorer if I didn't have the young people in my life. And I have young people in my life who started off when they were children, they're now in their 30s and they're still in my life. So I don't see discipleship as something you do for a season. It's something you give your life to someone.
Yeah. And don't remove the fun from it. Because sometimes I hear people talking about discipleship or what they do, and I'm like, boy, that sounds really stale. For us, like we can't do anything for too long without laughter coming into it. And so, really encouraging people that while we're doing these things that you've been talking about and navigating life, remember that life has fun times too. And something as well that we often do is, during these mistakes that you talk about, it can be really easy to get bummed out or really serious and beat yourself up over them. But I know for us, we take every opportunity we can to laugh at the mistakes that we make and inject the humor into them as we walk through those times as well. So to keep fun as well as a big part of these sort of discipleship type relationships.
Yeah, I think it's really just the call of a Christian is to disciple the people around you. I mean, going back to sort of that Matthew 28 and Acts 1 verse 8, it's go and make disciples. That's the call of a Christian, and we want to be living that Christian lifestyle, but at the same time, it's not supposed to be a burden. Or it is supposed to be a burden, but the Bible says, the Lord's burden is easy and his yoke is light. And that sort of sense is that whilst we're supposed to still have that burden on us, it's supposed to be a joy. It's supposed to be a way to help you grow as an individual, as well as, if purely from a selfish point of view, to help just you grow as well as the people around you. That it's just a lifestyle, because discipleship is a lifestyle, because Christianity is a lifestyle. And I think you can't get Christianity without discipleship, or the truest form of Christianity, at least.
So as we come towards the end, there may be people listening that think, I'm not really doing this. I haven't really got anyone younger than me that I'm pouring into. They say this sounds really good, like a really good idea, but I'm not really sure where to start. What are maybe a couple points that you would say to someone in that situation where you know what, I want to do this. Where do I go from here? What are the first few steps that they can take?
Well, like I say to my friends, if you're every single time you have a decision to make, pray about it. that's the sort of thing. God, is this something that you have for me in this season? Is this something that you want for me to do now during this time? And if the answer is yes, then I believe that God's going to open up the door and allow people to welcome into your life. But something that's interesting, and I don't think we've really talked about, is to disciple someone, they don't necessarily have to be younger than you. They can be older than you as well. And so whilst you may not have anyone younger than you in your life, there may be a new Christian, or someone who just calls themselves a Christian but hasn't really grown into their sort of Christian heritage, if you will, in your life, that and God might want you to disciple them, or God will bring those people into those life if that's what he's calling you to do. And it is the biggest joy to disciple someone, but also don't rush it on to discipling people. I think something that I definitely 100% fall foul to almost all the time is sort of rushing on to the next point. I see the future, the grass is always greener on the other side. And that's sort of, we enjoy the stage that you're at. If you're being discipled right now, then enjoy being discipled. And actually, being discipled's probably got no burden on it whatsoever, in the sense that you're just learning and you're growing and you're going to that person who's discipling you. And if you don't have someone who is walking alongside you in that sense, because I know quite a few young people don't, and quite a few young adults don't actually, where they don't feel like they have that sort of person who's mentoring or discipling them, or just they're walking along life with someone who's more mature or stronger in the faith than they are, then just look at your local church, I think. And your local church, or the church that you attend, will have those people younger than you which you can disciple, but they'll also have those people older than you as well, probably, depending how old you are, who can disciple you in that sense as well. And so I think the church is where we should sort of go to grow, to sharpen ourselves, and to find those people who we can grow and sharpen ourselves with. So yeah.
And so I would throw this in as one of my final statements. When I said who are you discipling, I think you are discipling for people. Your siblings will be looking up to you.
Yeah.
You are leading the way. You are doing it, and they will be looking to, when I'm 17, who should I be when I'm 18? You will always be going ahead of them.
Yeah.
So I would just throw it out your way that subconsciously or consciously or whatever, you play a major discipleship role.
And whether you like it or not.
Yeah, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
In their lives that your parents cannot play.
Yeah.
They're never going to be the big brother, the oldest brother. And being the oldest one, there's responsibilities and privileges. And so I would just throw to your way that you are a discipler, and you have 4 who you are discipling. And it sounds like you're doing a great job of it.
Hopefully.
Josh, thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate it. I know we had your dad on a few episodes ago, so for people listening, I'll put his link in the description as well, so they can go listen to his episode and find out more about the person who raised you. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If it inspired you, please rate us and subscribe on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or another podcast platform.